The first snow of autumn always arrived without asking permission. One moment, the golden hills around Willow Creek glowed beneath the gentle morning sun. The next, dark clouds rolled over the Rocky Mountains like a silent army, swallowing the brilliant blue sky, one ridge at a time. The wind bent the tall grasses, carried the scent of pine through the valley, and whispered that winter was closer than anyone wanted to believe. That was how our story began, on a quiet ranch where courage had become an everyday habit. Before we continue, if you enjoy heartfelt Western stories filled with mystery, family, and frontier justice, we'd love to have you with us. Consider subscribing and letting us know in the comments where you're watching from. Now, let's return to the Carter Ranch. Emily Carter tightened the leather glove around her hand and leaned her shoulder against the weathered fence post. The split rail had shifted during the previous night's wind, and one stubborn board refused to line up. She smiled despite herself. The ranch always seemed to have one more job waiting. Long chestnut brown hair rested in a loose braid over one shoulder, and a simple silver wedding band hung from a chain around her neck, hidden beneath the faded blue fabric of her pioneer dress. The ring had not left her since the day she lost Daniel. It was no longer simply a wedding band. It was a promise she carried with her. Nearby, 11-year-old Lily Carter scattered grain across the yard, while laughing as several impatient chickens hurried toward her boots. "Easy," she giggled. "There's enough for everyone." A curious colt nudged her shoulder, hoping for extra attention instead of breakfast. "You aren't fooling me either," Lily said, scratching its neck. Emily looked toward her daughter, and for just a moment, the weight she carried every day felt lighter. Life had not been kind to the Carter family. Daniel's death had forced Emily to learn every part of running the ranch herself. She negotiated cattle prices, repaired fences, balanced accounts, and faced each new season without the man who had once stood beside her through every sunrise. Many people had quietly suggested she sell. Many believed a widow and a young girl could never hold on to a frontier ranch for long. Emily had politely thanked them for their concern. Then she had returned to work. Because this land held more than cattle and timber, it held memories. The crisp autumn air suddenly changed. Emily paused. The horses noticed it before anyone else. Several lifted their heads together. Birdsong disappeared. The wind grew colder. She looked west toward the mountains. Dark clouds poured over the peaks. Snow. Earlier than expected. "Lily," Emily called calmly. The girl looked up. "I see it. We'll bring the horses closer before the storm arrives." Lily nodded immediately. She had learned long ago that hesitation could become dangerous on the frontier. The two worked side by side, guiding the animals towards safer pasture. Fallen leaves danced across the yard, while the first icy gusts swept through the cottonwood trees bordering the creek. Then Emily stopped walking. One horse was missing. She counted again. Every rancher knew their animals. One unfamiliar chestnut horse staggered into view from the northern trail. Its saddle remained fastened. Its reins dragged across the ground. But there was no rider. Emily frowned. The horse's shoulder carried fresh scratches from brush, and its breathing came in heavy bursts. It hadn't wandered. It had run. "Lily." Her daughter immediately sensed the change in her mother's voice. "Stay here." "What happened?" "I'm going to find out." Emily secured the frightened horse inside the corral before climbing onto her own mare. Pulling her cream wool shawl tightly around her shoulders, she followed the fresh tracks leading back toward the rocky hills. Snowflakes drifted lazily through the air. Within minutes, they became thicker. The trail climbed into a narrow ravine where broken branches littered the ground. Emily noticed disturbed earth beside a cluster of boulders. Someone had fallen. She dismounted quickly. "Hello," she called. Only the wind answered. She searched farther along the rocks until she saw a dark trail coat beneath a patch of scrub pine. A man lay motionless against the frozen ground. His hat had rolled several feet away. One arm rested awkwardly beneath him. Snow collected across his shoulders. Emily hurried forward and knelt beside him. His face was weathered by years beneath the sun. A short beard framed a strong jaw, and a faded scar crossed his left cheek. He was breathing. Barely. She gently brushed melting snow from his forehead. "Can you hear me?" No answer. His pulse remained weak but steady. Emily looked toward the darkening sky. The storm was growing worse. Leaving him here meant certain death. She didn't know his name. She didn't know why he had been riding alone. None of it mattered. No one should be left to die alone, she whispered. With determination born from years of ranch work, Emily secured the unconscious cowboy across her horse as carefully as she could. The journey home was slow, every step made more difficult by the deepening snow, but she refused to stop until the familiar outline of the Carter Ranch appeared through the swirling white. By evening, the local doctor had treated the stranger beside the warmth of the stone fireplace. "He'll live," the doctor said while packing his bag. "You found him just in time." Emily simply nodded. When the doctor quietly offered to send a bill later, she shook her head. Helping someone isn't something to charge for. The doctor smiled with quiet respect before disappearing into the snowy night. The house settled into silence. A lantern flickered gently across weathered wooden walls. Lily slept upstairs. Outside, snow tapped softly against the windows. Near midnight, the injured cowboy stirred. His eyes opened slowly. Confused, he looked around the unfamiliar room before pushing himself upright with visible effort. His gaze wandered across the cozy ranch house, the fireplace, the wooden beams, the old family furniture. Then it stopped. On the mantel rested a framed photograph. A broad-shouldered rancher wearing a brown hat smiled confidently beside a younger Emily. The stranger stared at the photograph. The color slowly drained from his face. Almost without realizing it, he whispered the name. Daniel Carter. Emily stepped quietly into the room, carrying a steaming cup of coffee. The cowboy lifted his eyes toward her. After a long silence, he asked softly, "You're Daniel Carter's wife?" The room fell completely silent. Emily's fingers tightened around the warm coffee cup she had carried from the kitchen. The stranger's quiet question seemed to linger in the air between them, carried only by the gentle crackle of the fire. "You're Daniel Carter's wife?" Emily nodded slowly. "Yes," she answered, "I am." The cowboy lowered his eyes to the photograph once more. For several moments, he said nothing. His weathered face, marked by years beneath the western sun and the scar along his left cheek, seemed to carry memories far older than the lines around his eyes. "I never thought I'd see that face again," he murmured. Emily carefully placed the coffee on the small wooden table beside him. "You knew my husband?" The stranger looked toward the window where snow continued falling outside. "I knew him better than most men ever could." Emily pulled a chair closer to the fireplace and quietly sat down. "I'm Emily Carter." He nodded respectfully. Jack Sullivan. The name meant nothing to her. But the way he had spoken Daniel's name told her everything she needed to know. This was no coincidence. "You've been badly hurt," she said gently. "The doctor believes you were thrown from your horse." Jack gave a faint smile. "My horse has always been smarter than I am." Emily almost smiled in return. "He found us." Jack looked surprised. "He came home without me?" "He led us straight to you." Jack closed his eyes for a moment. "That old horse has saved my life twice now." Footsteps echoed softly from the staircase. Lily stood wrapped in her knitted wool sweater, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. "Mother?" Emily turned. "I thought I told you to stay in bed." "I heard voices." Emily motioned her closer. "Lily, this is Mr. Jack Sullivan." Jack tipped his head politely. "It's nice to meet you." Lily smiled shyly. "I'm glad you're feeling better." "So am I." She studied the bandages around his shoulder with genuine concern. "Does it hurt?" "Less than falling off a horse in a snowstorm." That answer earned the first laugh the house had heard all day. Even Emily found herself smiling. For a few precious moments, the heaviness inside the room eased. Emily soon guided Lily gently back upstairs. "Mr. Sullivan needs his rest." "I know," Lily whispered. "Good night." When the house grew quiet again, Emily returned to the fireplace. Jack continued looking at Daniel's photograph. "I owe your husband more than I could ever repay." Emily sat down once more. "Would you tell me?" Jack nodded slowly. "It happened nearly 20 years ago." His voice became distant, as though the firelight had carried him back across the years. "We were driving cattle through the mountains before winter closed the passes. I was young, confident enough to believe nothing could go wrong." He paused. "I was wrong." A sudden rockslide separated him from the rest of the crew. His horse stumbled. He was trapped beneath loose stone with a badly injured leg. The others couldn't reach me before nightfall. Jack looked into the flames. "I remember thinking that was where my trail ended." "But Daniel found you," Emily said quietly. Jack smiled. "He spent nearly 6 hours searching those mountains after everyone else believed I was already dead." Emily lowered her eyes. "That sounded exactly like Daniel. He refused to leave me." Jack's voice grew softer. "He built a fire, splinted my leg, stayed awake through the freezing night, and somehow got both of us off that mountain alive." Emily felt tears beginning to gather, but remained silent. "From that day forward," Jack continued, "I would have trusted Daniel Carter with my life." The room became still again. Outside, the storm continued covering the valley beneath fresh snow. Emily finally asked the question resting in her heart. "If you were such close friends, why didn't I ever hear your name?" Jack's expression changed. Not with fear, with regret. "I left Colorado a few years later." He took a slow breath. "Work carried me farther west, then farther north. Life has a way of putting miles between people before they realize how much time has passed." Emily nodded gently. She understood that better than most. Jack looked again toward Daniel's photograph. "The last time I saw him," he began quietly, "he wasn't talking about cattle." Emily leaned forward. "He was worried." "About what?" "He believed someone was stealing land." Emily frowned. "Stealing land? Not by force." Jack shook his head. "On paper." Emily listened carefully. Daniel had discovered documents that didn't match what honest families believed they owned. He said people were signing deeds they never intended to sign. Boundaries were being changed. Records were disappearing. Emily's heartbeat quickened. "He never mentioned any of this." "I'm not surprised." Jack spoke with quiet certainty. "He was trying to protect you." The fire popped sharply inside the stone hearth. Jack rested both hands on the blanket covering his knees. "He told me something I never forgot." Emily waited. "If anything happens to me," he said, "don't trust rumors. Trust the truth. Truth leaves tracks if you're patient enough to follow them." Neither of them spoke for several moments. Emily looked once more at Daniel's smiling photograph. For years, she had believed she knew every chapter of her husband's life. Now, she realized there were pages she had never seen. Jack slowly raised his eyes toward the heavy wooden ceiling. A thoughtful expression crossed his face. Then he looked toward the window overlooking the snow-covered hills beyond the ranch. "I've been trying to remember something since I woke up." Emily met his gaze. "What is it?" "A trail. A trail." He frowned, as though reaching for a memory hidden just beyond his grasp. "A trail Daniel and I rode together many years ago." His eyes widened slightly. "And there was a tree." He leaned forward, despite the pain in his shoulder. "It wasn't just any tree." Emily waited, hardly breathing. "I think Daniel carved a mark into it." Jack looked directly at her. "I think Daniel left us a path to follow." "I think Daniel left us a path to follow." Neither of them spoke for several heartbeats. The fire crackled softly as snow whispered against the cabin windows. Emily searched Jack's face, looking for any hint that exhaustion or fever had clouded his memory. Instead, she found only quiet certainty. "You truly believe that?" she asked. Jack nodded. "I've been trying to remember ever since I saw Daniel's photograph. It wasn't just a trail marker. At the time, I thought he was simply marking a shortcut through the mountains." He lowered his eyes. "Now I think he was pointing towards something he intended someone to find." Emily glanced toward the staircase where Lily slept peacefully. so the evidence may still exist. If Daniel hid it the way I think he did, Jack replied, then yes. The room settled into thoughtful silence. Outside, the storm continued through the night. Morning arrived beneath a sky washed clean by fresh snow. Golden sunlight stretched across the Carter Ranch, turning every fence rail and pine branch into glittering silver. Lily hurried outside, carrying feed for the chickens, while Emily checked the horses. Jack watched from the porch, leaning lightly against the railing. Though his shoulders still ached, he looked stronger than the night before. "You shouldn't be standing yet," Emily called. "I've spent enough time lying in bed." She smiled. "So I noticed." Lily looked between them. "Are we really going into the mountains?" Emily raised an eyebrow. "You were listening." "A little," Jack chuckled. "I suspected as much." Emily sighed with affectionate resignation. "You inherited your father's curiosity." Lily grinned proudly. "I know." After breakfast, Jack borrowed one of Daniel's old maps from a wooden drawer near the fireplace. His finger traced winding trails leading into the western hills. "There." Emily leaned closer. "The abandoned mountain pass?" Jack nodded. "Cattlemen stopped using it years ago, after the newer road opened through the valley." "And you're certain?" "No." He looked honestly at her. "I'm certain only that my memory leads there." Emily appreciated the answer. He wasn't promising miracles. He was following the only lead they had. Before leaving, Lily quietly slipped next door to the neighboring ranch. Old Mr. Harper was repairing a wagon wheel outside his barn. "If we aren't back before nightfall," Lily said, "would you please tell Sheriff Owen Parker where we've gone?" The old rancher frowned. "Is something wrong?" "I don't know." She hesitated. "But Mother said it's always wise to tell someone where you're traveling." Mr. Harper smiled kindly. "Your mother is a sensible woman. I'll send word if you're late." Lily thanked him and hurried back. The three riders left shortly afterward. Emily rode in front. Jack followed. Lily guided her pony carefully behind them. The trail climbed steadily through golden aspens whose leaves shimmered beneath the crisp autumn sun. For hours they followed forgotten paths, scarcely touched by travelers anymore. Jack occasionally stopped to study familiar landmarks. "I remember that ridge." He pointed toward a distant rock formation. "We camped there once." Another mile passed. Then suddenly he pulled gently on the reins. There. Emily followed his gaze. An enormous pine stood alone above the trail. Its trunk bore an old carving, weathered by years of wind and snow. Jack dismounted first. His gloved hand brushed away moss and lichen. A simple symbol appeared beneath the bark. Not initials, not a name, a carefully carved arrow. Emily felt her pulse quicken. It survived all these years. Jack looked toward the hillside beyond the tree. "I think we're close." "That." The arrow pointed toward a narrow stream that disappeared beneath scattered boulders. The three searched patiently. Minutes became nearly an hour. Then Lily called from beside a cluster of moss-covered stones. "Mother!" Emily hurried over. "What did you find?" "I don't know." Lily knelt. "This rock sounds different." Jack joined them. Together they rolled the heavy stone aside. Beneath it lay a rusted iron ring set into a flat slab. Emily grasped the ring. Jack helped lift. The stone cover shifted with a deep, grinding sound. Hidden below rested a tightly sealed metal box wrapped inside layers of old oilcloth. For a moment, none of them moved. Daniel had been here. Emily carefully lifted the box into the sunlight. Despite 20 years beneath the mountain, the contents remained dry. Inside rested a leather-bound journal, several folded survey maps, official land records bearing county seals, and multiple signed witness statements bundled together with faded ribbon. Emily opened the journal. The first page carried handwriting she recognized instantly. Daniel Carter. Her eyes filled with tears. "It's his." Jack removed his hat respectfully. He kept his promise. Emily gently closed the journal. "No." She looked toward the mountains surrounding them. "He kept faith." So miles away, one of Victor Grayson's ranch hands, guided cattle along the eastern ridge. From his vantage point, he spotted 3 riders emerging from the abandoned pass. He narrowed his eyes. One of them carried a weathered metal box strapped carefully behind the saddle. The rider turned his horse and galloped toward Grayson's ranch without delay. The return journey began quietly. Emily secured the journal and documents inside the metal box, wrapping everything carefully beneath a blanket. No one spoke much. Each understood the importance of what they carried. Late afternoon shadows stretched across the valley when hoofbeats echoed behind them. Jack turned first. 3 mounted riders approached rapidly. Their horses threw clouds of dust into the cold air. Emily instinctively guided Lily closer to her side. Jack's expression hardened. "They're following us." The riders closed the distance, but slowed just beyond speaking range, watching silently. No weapons were drawn. No words were exchanged. The tension alone was enough. Jack leaned toward Emily. "We don't stop." She nodded once. They continued toward Willow Creek. The riders followed. Tum! As the first buildings of town appeared in the distance, another group of horsemen emerged from the opposite road. Sheriff Owen Parker rode at their head with 2 deputies. He raised one hand. The trailing riders immediately pulled their horses to a halt. Sheriff Parker looked from Emily to the strangers behind them. "Everything all right here?" Emily met his eyes. "Yes, Sheriff." She glanced briefly at the metal box secured behind her saddle. "But we have something important that needs to reach the courthouse." The sheriff studied her expression, then nodded. "I believe we'd better escort you." With the deputies riding alongside them, the remaining journey passed without incident. The sun dipped low behind the mountains as Willow Creek's courthouse came into view. Emily dismounted slowly. She lifted Daniel's journal from the metal box and held it carefully against her chest. Townspeople paused in the street, watching in silence as she climbed the worn stone steps. She reached for the courthouse door. The hinges creaked open. Emily Carter stepped inside carrying Daniel's journal. Every head in the room turned to look. Emily Carter stood quietly in the doorway. Daniel's weathered journal pressed gently against her chest. Behind her came Jack Sullivan, his shoulder still bandaged beneath his brown trail coat, followed by Lily, who held the sealed metal box with both hands, as though it contained something far more valuable than paper. In many ways, it did. The murmur inside the courthouse faded into complete silence. Sheriff Owen Parker stepped forward. "Mrs. Carter has requested that these documents be examined immediately." At the front of the room, Margaret Ellis adjusted her round spectacles and carefully cleared a large oak table. "If you'll place everything here," she said softly. Emily laid Daniel's journal upon the polished wood. One by one, the remaining documents followed. Survey maps, official land records, signed witness statements. Margaret handled every page with remarkable care. Years spent protecting Willow Creek's public records had taught her to recognize genuine documents from clever imitations. She examined the county seals, compared signatures, checked registry numbers against large leather-bound ledgers brought from the courthouse archives. The room remained so quiet that every turning page seemed unusually loud. Finally, Margaret looked toward Sheriff Parker. "They're authentic." Another silence followed. Then she opened one of the courthouse ledgers. "I remember these registry numbers." Her fingers slowly traced several faded entries. "They match perfectly." Sheriff Parker nodded. "Please continue." Margaret carefully unfolded the original survey map. "The boundaries recorded here are different from those filed years later." She placed both maps side by side. "There should never have been a second version." Several ranch families leaned forward. Confused whispers spread across the room. Victor Grayson, dressed in his immaculate black frock coat and polished boots, rose slowly from the opposite side of the courtroom. "This proves nothing," he said calmly. "Old maps are often replaced." Margaret looked at him without emotion. "Maps are updated." She gently tapped Daniel's documents. "They are not secretly altered." The distinction settled heavily over the room. Sheriff Parker turned toward Jack. "Mr. Sullivan." Jack stepped forward. Would you tell us what you know? Jack removed his hat respectfully. He spoke slowly, clearly, without exaggeration. He described the mountain rescue 20 years earlier, his friendship with Daniel Carter, the conversations they had shared after long cattle drives. Daniel's growing concern that honest ranch families were losing land through forged paperwork rather than honest purchase. He told me, Jack said quietly, if anything happens to me, don't trust rumors, trust the truth. Jack looked toward Emily. He intended these records to speak when he no longer could. Victor Grayson folded his arms. A touching story. His voice remained composed. But stories don't decide ownership. No, Sheriff Parker answered. Evidence does. Margaret reached into another courthouse ledger. I believe we're missing one final record. She walked toward a cabinet rarely opened except for the oldest county archives. After several moments of searching, she carefully removed a dust-covered volume. Its leather binding had cracked with age. She carried it back to the table and slowly opened it. Page after page passed beneath her fingertips. Then she stopped. There it is. Everyone leaned forward. The original county registration. She compared the entry against Daniel's journal. Every measurement matched. Every boundary matched. Every signature matched. The fraudulent version filed years later did not. Margaret quietly closed the ledger. The original Carter boundaries were never legally changed. The room erupted into stunned whispers. Victor Grayson took a slow step backward. For the first time all afternoon, confidence disappeared from his face. Sheriff Parker looked toward him. Mr. Grayson. Victor said nothing. There is sufficient evidence to investigate forgery, fraudulent land transfers, and unlawful acquisition of neighboring ranch property. Sheriff Parker removed a pair of iron handcuffs from his belt. You are under arrest. Victor lowered his head. Without resistance, without argument, he offered his hands. Justice had arrived through the law. Not revenge, not violence, only the truth. Several weeks later, the county judge formally declared every forged transfer void. The Carter Ranch remained exactly where it had always belonged. Several neighboring ranch families also regained land they believed had been lost forever. For the first time in many years, the valley felt lighter. Winter slowly gave way to spring. Snowmelt filled the creek with sparkling water. Fresh grass covered the pastures. New calves wandered awkwardly beside their mothers. Life had begun again. On a bright afternoon, Lily guided one of the young horses across the pasture, while Jack watched from the fence. She's becoming quite a rider, he said. Emily smiled. She has a patient teacher. Jack laughed softly. I've mostly tried to stay out of the horse's way. Lily heard him and grinned. I heard that. The three of them laughed together. The sound drifted across the valley, like something the ranch had been waiting to hear. Kate. Inside the ranch house, Emily carefully placed Daniel's restored journal beside his framed photograph above the stone fireplace. For years, she had believed she had lost nearly everything. Now she understood something different. Daniel had never truly left. His courage, his honesty, and the promise he had entrusted to a friend had finally come home. Emily gently touched the silver wedding band hanging from the chain around her neck. Thank you, she whispered. Not in sorrow, in gratitude. A few days later, Jack saddled his horse before sunrise. His trail coat was packed, his bedroll secured. Emily and Lily walked with him to the front gate. I suppose this is goodbye, Emily said. Jack smiled gently. I've spent many years finishing a promise. He looked across the Carter Ranch glowing beneath the early morning sun. I wasn't certain what came after. Lily looked up at him. Do you really have to go? Jack rested one hand on the saddle. Then he looked at Emily. At the ranch, at the home that no longer felt unfamiliar, a quiet smile crossed his face. Maybe my journey brought me exactly where I was meant to be. The morning breeze stirred through the cottonwood trees. Some promises take years to fulfill. Some roads are longer than we ever expect. And sometimes, the greatest legacy we leave behind isn't written in deeds or journals, but in the lives we choose to protect and the truth we refuse to abandon. If this story touched your heart, we'd love for you to join us for more unforgettable journeys across the American frontier. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, thank you for riding these trails with us.